Hello, vinyl community. Bradley here. It is cold outside, like 3 degrees or something. Woo! I just went out a little bit ago. Had to rush right back in. Woo. Today, you know what today is? It's Jazz Day. Yeah. If you can hear the music in the background, you may know or not know it is Ahmad Jamal. I picked up 3 jazz albums in the last week. I thought I would show them to you. This one, Ahmad Jamal, But Not For Me. It was recorded in 1958 at the Pershing Lounge in Chicago. This would be considered a classic. Piano trio, piano, bass, drums. This was actually recorded on January 16th and 17th in 1958. Beautiful album. This particular pressing, which I was looking around for, there's a lot of different pressings, and this particular one, it's an EU pressing, which I'd never heard this label. I think they were just formed in the last year. One of those EU labels, you know what I mean? It is Jazz Twin is the name of the label. There's the rear. It is, this particular one is a gatefold. It's got some nice liner notes in here and everything. Sound quality, pretty darn good. Now this is a live recording from 1958, so, but a very, very nicely recorded one. On the rear, it's got a few liner notes. Kind of interesting. It says this album was reviewed in 1958 by Downbeat, the jazz magazine. It says here, the Downbeat review was mildly negative, referring to Jamal as playing, quote, cocktail music. While the reviewer acknowledged Jamal's skill and influence on other jazz musicians, such as Miles Davis, he wrote that, you know, he's really good, but he called it cocktail music, which it was recorded in a cocktail lounge. So, hey, what's wrong with that? You know. Anyhow, this is a very good album. This particular reissue has a couple bonus tracks. And I think it was recorded over 2 nights. There were like, I don't know, 40 songs or something. So they pared it down to probably 8 originally that was on this album. And this unexpectedly became a really huge hit back in 58. And so with some of the proceeds basically from the success of this album, Ahmad Jamal, he opened his own lounge and restaurant. I'm not sure where. But this allowed him, when he was not on the road with his trio, they would come back and they would have a place to play. So, very nice. And I like the space in this album. So, I would highly recommend that. The second, also a classic jazz album. It is Art Pepper Meets the Rhythm Section. Now this was recorded in 1957. And like I said, the title is Art Pepper Meets the Rhythm Section. Well, who is the Rhythm Section? The Rhythm Section is the rhythm section from Miles Davis' first great quintet, which is Red Garland on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Philly Joe Jones on drums. This is a wonderful album. I was reading a little bit about the recording of this album. Basically, it was, I guess maybe Art Pepper kind of knew about the recording, but whatever, the communication was really bad. So Contemporary Records, which that's where this was recorded at, called him up one morning and said, hey, come in the studio today. We're going to record. I will show the label, Contemporary. I love that simple yellow label. So anyhow, he went in the studio, and according to the story, he had never met any of these other musicians. And also there's varying stories of some people say Art had not played in 2 weeks. Possible. There's other stories that say he had not played in 6 months, which I think that myth has been debunked by he had other recording sessions during that time. But anyhow, the main idea is he went in pretty much completely unprepared. He had never met these other guys. Now, Art Pepper was a West Coast jazz musician, cool jazz. Now, the rhythm section, they would be considered, well, obviously East Coast, more of a hot jazz, more of a hard bop vein back then. And it is really neat. In this album, and Art Pepper plays alto sax on here. So, actually, this melds together perfectly. You've got the rhythm section, which I think you can probably detect. They're playing more of a little more upbeat, hotter jazz. Whereas Art Pepper on alto sax, he's playing cool jazz. But it fits perfectly together. You would think you mix hot jazz and cool jazz, you get lukewarm jazz. No, not here. It's really good. Fantastic album. Most of these are, well, I think all of them are standards. And they, like I said, he just met the players. I would assume they went through the songs maybe one time, and then they turned on the recorder. Art Pepper was very good at improvisation, and he just can play anything. Sounds beautiful. And also, I like, I have a few of these contemporary albums, a couple originals and a couple represses. And every one of them, of course, these are cool jazz, which I think cool jazz has a little more space than the more of the hot jazz. But anyhow, in the contemporary studios, which I'm not sure exactly what studio it was, but they recorded, their recording process was, everything is just crystal clear and crisp, and space. There's space in there. I have all stereo releases, and on all of them, the stereo panning is, you might call it rather drastic, but everything blends in. Like the sax, that's probably 99% will come out of the left speaker. In the right speaker will be 99% of the drums, and whatever, 75% of the bass. The piano is even more towards that way, but they use the with the reverb. It's not overly reverb, but when you use the reverb in stereo, it'll kind of even out the sound. But I love contemporary pressings. They are excellent. And this particular one was a OJC pressing, which they press really good. Jazz pressings on a lot of contemporary. And I'm glad I picked this version because I was looking around. And okay, next and last album. This is a newer album. It was released in early 2018, last year. It is by a tenor saxophonist, Walter Smith III. First of all, I will show you another album cover. I would call this a retro album cover. There's this name of this album is called Twio. Well, look at this Blue Note album cover from the 60s. A similar style, even the fonts and all that. So I think there's a connection with that, and I love it. I love this album cover. I will show it once again. Now this is basically a three-piece jazz group. It's not a piano trio. You've got drums, you've got bass, and you've got a tenor saxophone. That's pretty much all this is, which I will go down the lineup rundown here. Okay, on bass, well, got Walter Smith on tenor. On bass, on 4 of the songs, Harish Raghavan plays bass. Now on the other half of the songs, you have Christian McBride playing bass. So the bass duties are split here. Eric Harlan plays drums. Now also on this, Joshua Redman, another current tenor saxophonist, he plays along with Walter Smith on 2 of these songs. So 2 of these songs is a 4-piece group, but you still have 2 tenor saxophonists. So there's, in this whole album, there is no what you would call a chordal instrument, meaning comping along like piano or guitar or even vibes, no organ or anything like that. So it's more of a stripped down jazz. Now you have to be really good to pull something like this off, and Walter Smith does a fantastic job of doing this. I must admit, when I first got this album, I played it a couple times, and I was on the fence post, like, do I really like this? Well, after the 3rd time, you become a little more familiar with the songs and the pace of everything, and yeah, it's a very good album, very good album. And I would also say that, and it's nice having Joshua Redman on a couple songs to mix things up a little. You know, there's a lot of interplay, and they're having a good time. And also, I think in November, maybe of 2018, Walter Smith III has another release. I'm not sure if I think it's under his name, but it's more of a larger band. I think 5 or 6 pieces, more of the, you know, traditional vein of a jazz group or whatever. And I've listened a little bit to that, and that sounds very nice. I'm definitely going to pick that up. In fact, I've already got it ordered. This is on, it's called Whirlwind Records. I'll show you the label. Once again, the name is Twio. I would imagine that's how you pronounce it, rather than Twio. I don't know. Who knows? But anyhow, this is a very nice album. I like it. So I think that's about all I have to say about that. And last, but not least, I have a book here, and probably nobody will go out and buy this. I don't know. But I bought it a couple months ago when it first came out. I was at Barnes & Noble. It is called, the name of the book is Playing Changes by Nate Chinen, or Chinen. Nate was the writer for the New York Times, the jazz section. But I think they cut that out a while back. So he does work for, I think it's NPR and some other things. But this book is basically about modern jazz in the last 30 years, from 1987 to 2018. If you're interested in Miles Davis, Coltrane, Herbie, you will not find it in this book. This deals pretty much strictly with the newer artist. So if you're interested in more of the modern jazz, you'll find out quite a bit about some of the musicians out there. And so this is a very good book. It's a nice read, and one interesting thing in this book is he tells about when jazz at the Lincoln Center was first formed around 1987. To make this happen, they had to get like lots of corporate donations and everything else to make this happen. And Branford Marsalis, I think, rather than Wynton, was one of the main, they kind of worked with him, and he really got it going. So a lot of this book deals with kind of like maybe a tension between jazz at the Lincoln Center and other modern day jazz musicians. Because a lot of these musicians at this time, they would be playing at, you know, the few small clubs that still existed at the time in New York City, and just like lofts or performing arts places where just people that were really into this would open up in kind of like abandoned buildings or whatever. So there's like a little tension between those two camps. So if you're into that, it'd be the perfect book for you. So, like I said, it's Baby It's Cold Outside. That's all the words I know to that song. So anyhow, till the next time, this is Brad. Take care, stay warm. See ya.